Welcome to this July 4th edition of Doug and Friends. Here's Doug.
Hi.
And here are our friends, joined today by Ben Merkle and Jared Longshore as we get ready to celebrate the 4th of July in this festive summer time of year here in Moscow.
Yes.
Yeah, you guys have big plans for the 4th?
Blow stuff up.
Blow stuff up?
Just not ourselves.
Smoke some meat.
Smoke some meat.
I enjoy sitting on the hill. We live out of town on a hill, and I enjoy looking at Moscow at all the people who are disregarding what the authorities say.
That's right. It's a celebration of civil disobedience.
In celebration of that.
Yeah.
It seems somehow fitting.
That's right. Good. Well, it has been a big week in terms of politics since it's 4th of July, government-y sort of stuff. We had a bunch of Supreme Court cases that came down that were mixed bag, but some ones that were pretty good.
Yeah.
Doug, you have any particular thoughts on any of the ones that you saw? Were you tracking any of them that you thought were particular?
Yeah, there was one stinker, and everything else was wonderful.
Okay. What was the stinker?
The stinker was a decision that went against, it basically allowed the intel agencies or the government to bully tech companies into releasing data.
Okay.
And it was a setback for free speech advocates and freedom from, that kind of warrantless activity. And so as we're seeing, this is my take on this, as we're seeing the comeuppance of many corners of the deep state, it seems to me that the intel agencies will be the last man standing. When it comes to that, they know how to defend themselves better than other entities do.
Yeah,
and
they know where all the bodies are buried.
They know where the bodies are buried,
and
they know how to play dirty, and they're pretty slippery. It astonishes me that nobody from the intel community is in jail yet.
Right,
nobody after all the shenanigans of the last 6 years. 8 years.
Yeah.
They're good.
They're
good.
It's impressive.
So, and there's a default assumption that many Christians, conservatives have, the thin blue line, we stand with our cops and our military and the intel agencies because they're fighting for our freedom.
Yeah.
But part of the reason they're going to be the last entity standing as we root out corruption is because a lot of people haven't realized yet just how corrupt the military has gotten, just how corrupt the intel agencies have gotten, how in the tank they are with the deep state.
The best
so that was the bad. That was the sad bad one.
Yeah.
But then after that, there was the Chevron case.
Yeah, was that that's the big one.
Well, that's one of the big ones.
Yeah.
The Chevron case is basically it guts the regulatory agencies, and because they could just sort of make stuff up and go in and make you do things, and the Supreme Court said no, you can't.
Right. So you Congress would hand over power to big vague goals. Hey, accomplish this goal. You guys figure out how to do it, and then those guys could pass rules and regulations that had the force of law, which citizens were powerless to do anything about because it didn't matter if you voted out your congressman. He wasn't making those rules anyway.
Right.
You couldn't replace the president because he's not down in the weeds like that.
That was a big one. There's going to be a lot of regulations or the regulatory presence of the alphabet agencies, EPA type of people, is going to go away from the daily lives of small businesses and people who are trying to function with all this red tape. It got rid of a lot of red tape.
Yeah, or at least it opens the door that now you've got recourse. There's things you can go do, and presumably that will cause them to kind of retreat back so that they don't overextend themselves.
They don't have a blank check anymore to do that. That was wonderful. And when you look at the left flipping out over these decisions, it tells you how important they were. And then there was the foundation for a lot of the prosecution of the J6 defendants was just destroyed by the Supreme Court. And that not only affects the J6 defendants, but it is all wrapped up with one of Trump's trials and maybe more than one of his trials. So that was also very good news.
So you see this as, hey, there was some reassertion of constitutional checks. The Supreme Court actually did its job in general. There's a couple of stinkers, but in general, you think you were applauding as a number of these came down.
In general, I think that this was an actual setback for one part of the government, and the setback was done by another part of the government, which is not the pristine Jeffersonian model, but it was messy, but it was good.
What do you think about the Trump immunity? The fact that they've said
Oh,
that
was
in his official acts he can't be criminally tried for things that he did in his official acts, but in his unofficial acts, private acts, obviously he's still subject to various sorts of censure.
And we all know what that means. If Trump were to shoot the butler, right,
they could
he could be prosecuted criminally. But if he ordered a strike, let's say, in another country, and some American civilians were killed, then which happened under Obama, right? If he does that, that's an official act. You can't be prosecuted criminally for that. If it was egregious and unconstitutional and stuff, that's what impeachments are actually for. It's not like there's no recourse. It's if someone is misbehaving in office, then there are things you can do short of criminal prosecution.
And the reason that, and this actually is a pretty big deal because it does at least put some brakes on the potential Banana Republic type recriminations that we would be facing if every time the next guy got into office, he could turn around and prosecute his opponents and things like that.
Because the argument people make is that, well, no one is above the law.
Mm-hmm.
The reason we have to do this gnat strangling and go after him for, in the New York case, it was a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
A misdemeanor that was ratcheted up into a felony. Well, their argument is no one is above the law. So we have to keep our politics clean. What you're actually doing is ensuring that they're going to get absolutely dirty, because you've turned every election into a death match, a caged death match. So you're fighting not only for the election or the position, but you're fighting for your freedom, your survival. If you are going to be executed if you lose the election, how interested are you going to be in making sure you play fair?
Right.
And I wonder I remember you wrote about this back when Trump became president. I remember you dropped the piece. So that's really nice that you get to point back and be like, look, so
it
judicious.
Gives me a warm feeling all over.
It's so judicious of you.
Because in the Trump campaign in 2016, the crowds were yelling, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. And then when he astonished me by getting elected, one of the first things I did is no, don't lock her up.
Yeah.
Because that is going to destroy the precedent of leave your political opponent alone.
Right.
But then they didn't listen.
they didn't listen to you.
And he did start the rhetoric. I still remember the clip. Right? She's like, it was actually a great takedown because she said the last thing we'd want is for you to become president. He's like, yeah, because you'd be in prison. It's like Trump right back to her. But one of the questions I have is, like, are we already there? If you're reading the culture and the kind of things that they've done to Trump, is there any way to put that monkey back in the box?
Yeah, I think it's like 1,000 monkeys. I don't know. Well, I think this Supreme Court decision might do that, right?
Which one?
The presidential immunity thing, because they're basically saying whatever the Democrats did this time, they can't do it again.
Yeah.
Right. So if Trump argued, or let's say Trump's advisors argued, you have to prosecute Biden, you have to prosecute Hillary now, because otherwise if they win the next election, they're going to come after you like they just did. Well, now there's a counter argument. No, they can't. The Supreme Court knocked that weapon out of their hands.
Right, and it still leaves room for some of the prosecutions, it sounds like, to go forward. It was, hey, you guys actually have to establish that in that particular case, when he was, urging Mike Pence or the state electors to, switch sides and not vote for whoever they'd been bound to. That's not an official act because the president doesn't have the authority. He doesn't have the power to dictate to state electors who they vote for, and therefore, if he did something illegal there, that's still on the table because it wasn't an official act. So there's still things that he's going to have to navigate in terms of the craziness of the end of the 2020.
Right. So it's not absolute immunity across the board for everything. I think it's just very healthy.
Yeah. Did you guys watch the debate?
Yeah.
I watched the highlights.
You watched the highlights.
Low lights.
The low lights. The cave.
No, I watched the whole thing, and I thought it was utterly unremarkable until all of a sudden the CNN panel came on, and they were blown away by it. And that's when I was like,
Yeah.
I thought we all knew that Biden was like this. This is the most strange thing ever to be.
I've known this for years.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought it was remarkably, I thought Trump was really restrained. That was part of the remarkable thing was he was really restrained, and Biden was exactly what we knew Biden was. And then all of a sudden we were surprised by it. That was the weird part.
Yeah, that was entertaining. I think we watched at my house after the CNN panels for about an hour because we were just we thought it was so fun. And do you have any thoughts on what'd you like on the highlights?
I liked nothing about the highlights. Well, I mentioned this, the Wade show with Wade. I thought he did a great. Before we were talking, I just think he did a great clip. He opened with weird, strange addicts, some of whom seem to like eat styrofoam that's in car seats. And then he said, we keep watching this stuff. And it really is like, I mean, again, I watched the highlights. So maybe substantial things were said that didn't make it into the highlight reel.
Maybe not.
Were there substantial things said?
No, okay. I'm suspicious that there weren't. And it's like, it's really something. I mean, NSA, we do a lot of hard work to introduce people to the liberal arts tradition and the great books. You got to really kind of get on some coffee to read Herodotus or St. Augustine's City of God. And then I'm watching the highlights. I'm like, this is an absolute void. It's just, we have fleed all substance, and I'm worried about it. Like why do we as a society just keep wanting to like latch down on really what is vacuous? So
Why is he the leader of the free world?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that terrible, like, what is it they say about, hey, the deal with the monarchy is sometimes, you can do better than the people. The problem with your democracy is that you actually get what you deserve.
Yeah.
There's this intimate representative relationship that when you're looking at the two men, I do think that's a sad testimony in a fairly accurate representation of the people of where we're going. Now, maybe not exactly. I still have hope for restoration, but I'm like, it's kind of like representative of how hollow we've become. Yeah.
And if Biden is elected in November with that on display, all right, eyes open, millions of eyes on that, okay, we all agree he's not there. And if he gets elected in that condition, then we deserve everything we get. And if he gets elected by means of manifest cheating, and the people who didn't vote for him put up with the manifest cheating, then we deserve everything we get. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Just judgment all the way down.
It's just judgment all the way down.
I think as I thought about the highlight reel, I thought, which torture would you rather endure, watching that presidential debate or a Taylor Swift song?
Wow,
they're both just, they're just both the abyss. You know what I mean? This is like kind of what's going on. But I wonder about the stealing the election thing.
Yeah.
What's your read on that? Do you think they're going to behave given what happened last time? Do you think there's going to be regulations put in place, or do you think this one is likely to be stolen as well?
So I think that they had, I believe that the election was rigged. And I'm not talking about middle of the night in Fulton County or Maricopa, whatever dirty deeds. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Russiagate, the stuff they're doing out
flooding the zone with ballots, absentee ballots all over the place, so they come back.
And then not letting it be challenged. Right. And the Banana Republic stuff of putting Trump on trial in the middle of a presidential campaign. I mean, that's election tampering in the middle of an election. Mm-hmm. Out in the broad light of day, and everybody sees it, and so that's so they're cheating now. So If they cheat even more, or if it's even more egregious, this is where you back up and say, okay, are they really this bad? Are they really so conceited and so full of themselves that they thought this was a good idea? Or are they doing 17th dimension chess with us? And if I suspect it's mostly the former. I suspect it's mostly people who've been drinking their own propaganda juice. But if it's the latter, and I think there are some people who know what they're doing on the left, what could the plan be? What are the options? One is that they really want Kamala to be president, and they know that Joe's not going to make it 4 years. If he were to be elected, I think we'd be looking at a 25th amendment, the cabinet declaring him not fit to govern, but that gets us Kamala. Okay, and there are people who are invested in the DEI stuff
that would go for that.
And I think they know that Kamala would not get elected if
they replace him now.
Right, and she's on the ballot. I don't think. I mean, in her prime, she's as incoherent as as Biden is in his dotage. So that's one thing. Another thing is another possibility is they're really smart people and they know that there's a reckoning coming economically, or they know there's some bad stuff coming down the pike, and they're going to hand the baby to Trump. Yeah, let him win, and then everything is going to come crashing down, and they've got Trump to blame. They're playing the long game. That's another possibility. One of the things that Aaron McIntyre just tweeted, and I think this is very true, the previous historic landslide was Nixon-McGovern, and McGovern carried Massachusetts, if I remember correctly, and that was all. And there's strong arguments for saying the deep state took Nixon out. They just weren't going to put up with that. So one of the possibilities is that they're prepared to lose an election because they've still got control of the apparatus of government, of the intel agencies and so on, and they feel like they can handle Trump. They can come up with another pandemic or a climate change emergency or something.
Do other things. Yeah, it seems to me that the risk that they're running electorally was what the debate did is it did at least spook enough Democrats that they're talking about it, and that they may end up outside the margin of fraud, where any of the shenanigans in absentee ballots and early ballots and early voting and whatever other tools they have, that they'll be doing that in so many places that they won't be able to actually stave it off. So if they get outside the margin of fraud and he gets it, that we may be getting there. Do you think that they try to replace him, Biden, before the
Biden? I think everybody's of two minds. Because there are certain states, there's like 16 states that they're already past the deadline for doing that. So they would have to say, we're going to replace our candidate, and we don't care that we're past the deadline. Deadlines are white supremacy, right? And then, but that's just inviting lawsuits, right? And 3 of those states, Georgia, Nevada, and Wisconsin, are swing states. So 3 of the 16 are swing states, and they can't unless they say we're gonna, and they get some federal judge to say, well, you have to let them do it because it's white supremacy not to. And then it's just a genuine constitutional crisis.
Right. So it seems like one of the things, like in the last few months, is seeing some of the civil war is too strong, but some of the divisions on the left. You kind of seen this with the Israel-Palestine stuff, where the left is fighting each other in various ways, and then it seems like the reaction to the debate is a similar example where you have journalists, the New York Times calling for him to step aside, bow out, but then Barack Obama and Bill Clinton saying, no, he's our guy, we're going all the way. And so there's these weird kind of divisions that you don't normally see because they often operate in lockstep. And so it's just struck me that's a, don't get in the way of your enemy when he's fighting it himself. That there's a like, let him just duke it out and and keep on keeping on, that would be the smart thing.
There's more than one fault line. So there's the RFK thing,
Yeah.
the vaccines and the mistreatment of RFK, not letting him compete at all. So there's the RFK division. There is the October 7th division, which you've got the rank and file leftists are anti-Semitic, and the donor class of the Democratic Party is Jewish, right? Big Jewish money, people who live in Israel. So you've got this division between the donor class and the indoctrinated college student left. So and that's going to be festive at the Democratic convention. I think before all this, we were already going to have riots at the Democratic convention,
and now you'll just have even more. It also seems like is fed into a little bit of the crisis of trust. I know that for us and probably a lot of folks who watch this, we haven't trusted anybody in a long time. The media has beclowned themselves, the political class. But it did seem like a lot of the journalists, if they were just acting, had sort of bought into the no, Biden is super sharp behind closed doors myth, and then had it just crumble in front of them in about 90 minutes.
Right.
Do you think that there's stepping out and thinking about that crisis of trust? Like who do you believe? How do you make decisions? Who can you trust? That seems to be like a more longer term corrosive thing for society, and that just keeps piling up when you can't rely on anybody to tell you the truth or to not spin it in a particular way. Is there any thoughts on that about what do you do in the face of that kind of corrosion of trust? That this just kind of was another instance of that.
Yeah, it was. You've got the people in Washington. There was the first tier inside the White House, the people who knew, who absolutely knew, the people pulling the wires, administering the meds, the people who knew. And then there was the second tier, and I think some of their astonishment and dismay and anger is genuine because they were being lied to, but I think they culpably believed the lie. So the part of the anger is, you did this to me.
Yeah, shame on me.
And I kind of let you. So the second tier people, the Joe Scarboroughs of the world. I talked to Biden 3 weeks ago, and he was sharp as a tack. Well, either you're one of the liars, you're one of the first tier liars, or it's a great example of the power of suggestion. If you've got all the important people saying, "Oh, he's sharp as a tack, he's sharp as a tack," you're going to go in there believing that that's what you're going to see, and you're going to project. And then when it all comes crashing down and you look like an idiot, then it's anger, embarrassment, humiliation, which is everything we're seeing.
Yeah. As we head into the fall and people are starting to think about their vote, how do you think about so we're faced with these two choices. There they were, geriatric 101. That's it. It's a dumpster fire. Are there particular ways that you think about the vote, about what you're doing when you're voting? Because it seems to me that a lot of Christians have really weird views of what voting is. I know that even I, growing up, 15, 20 years ago, what I thought a vote was and what I think it is now has probably shifted pretty substantially in terms of what the meaning of a vote is or what I'm doing when I'm voting, what my calculations are. Are there certain things that you think, man, it's really important for Christians to say, focused on these are the things you're actually doing, and these other things are things you shouldn't even worry about? That should not factor in at all.
Yeah, I would argue that Christians need to shake free of the idea that voting is a civic sacrament, right? Where you've got to purify your heart and go do a pure thing. I don't think it's sacramental at all. Basically, what you're doing. I'll just flip it around. There was one poll after the debate that said 67% of the people thought that Trump won the debate, and there were 33% that thought that that Biden won the debate. Now, the first impulse is to have all those people rounded up and have their driver's licenses taken away. Why are you driving?
Yeah.
Why? But there may be a charitable construct to put on the 33%. They saw, as much as the rest of us did, that Biden wasn't up to the occasion. But they are voting for their machine. Right.
How much do you think that's their confidence in their machine versus Trump derangement syndrome? We can't do that, or are those the same thing?
I think it overlaps because I think they know, and I think they understand better than many Christians do, that you're voting for the cabinet, you're voting for the staffers in the White House, and if Biden is elected, there will not be one evangelical Christian in the White House anywhere, nowhere. If Trump is elected,
and you're going to have trannies everywhere,
trannies all over the place.
Just all the demented will be front, center, and
all
celebrated.
The things. All the things. If Trump is elected, the White House is going to be crawling with evangelicals.
Right.
Now, you might want to argue that some of the evangelicals maybe have a little something on their conscience where they said things to get the job or whatever that they shouldn't have.
Or they're the weird evangelical, the health, wealth, prosperity evangelical types that you just, if you sit next to them on an airplane and you find out you both believe in Jesus, and then 5 minutes later you go, ooh. Yeah, so like it's that there could be some of that too. But
Paula White's their pastor.
Exactly.
You've got that sort of thing. But it's like Thomas Cranmer arguing for the legitimacy of Henry VIII's divorce, right? Politics is you want to keep your conscience clean, but you can be grateful for the people who are in there making hard choices like Cranmer did, right? Because that's why we have Protestantism entrenched in England. Goes back to that, goes back to that moment.
And it's like having the prophet who is still in which court was it in Israel?
Obadiah.
Oh yeah, who is still kind of somehow able to maneuver in there, and because of that was able to save a bunch of other folks because he was positioned in the right place at the right time.
Right. So basically, I'm the president. It's something I forget the exact numbers, but the president has the authority to politically appoint about 4,000 to 5,000 people.
Right.
Okay. Now that's just the tippy top of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. There's something like 4 million federal civil service employees, 4 million, and that's not counting some of the other branches and stuff. And so what you're voting for is steerage, influential positions, and who's going to be advising and who's going to be that. I want to be living in a world where decisions are made by that group as opposed to this group over here.
Which is a binary choice. It's not like there's some other third choice of run by all evangelical Christians who could sign the Westminster Confession and are sober-minded to their back teeth and are going to govern like statesmen. That's not on the ballot.
Right.
And so you're in our system, it's a binary choice. It's either going to be governed by these people or by those people. And it does seem like that often is a. So do you think that evangelicals sometimes focus too much on the candidate himself, relative to the sort of the You're arguing for an administrative approach. There's you're voting for an administration and a platform. Here's what they want to do, and here's the people who are going to do it.
So here's the thing. I didn't vote for Trump in 2016, and I did in 2020, and I'm going to again in 2024. The reason I didn't in 2016 is because character matters, and I just flat didn't believe him.
Right.
Character is pragmatic.
Yeah. I thought, okay, I've been lied to by Republican candidates my whole life. And then here's this middle of the road New York businessman, tawdry lifestyle. He's making conservative noises. And I really don't believe, I don't believe the squeaky clean guys. So why would I believe this guy? Mm-hmm. Well, then he kept his word.
Right.
So
partly it seems because he was so transactional. I was like, well, if the evangelicals said they voted for me because they wanted Supreme Court justices, I guess I better give them their Supreme Court justices.
So he made the deal with Jeffress and other people in the Southern Baptist Convention. It was a transactional deal. You support me, I'll give you I'll give you judges. That's the thing that evangelicals asked for, and that's what they got. So all of a sudden, to my astonishment, Trump kept his word, and I thought, what's going on? So the usual pattern is for Republicans to run to the right and then govern to the middle. And what Trump did is he ran to the middle and governed right. And it was just completely.
And so because of that, you're saying that at one level the character still matters, but relative to those other considerations, what's on the what's the platform, and how does it compare to the other guy's platform, and what sorts of people will be executing it?
Right.
That those ought to weigh higher in your calculation as and you're doing it again in that binary way. It's platform to platform, personnel to personnel, and then candidate to candidate, and all of those go in. But those first two actually, in some ways, you're saying are more important or more carry more weight than just simply is he an honest guy?
Right.
Because it seems like you also have you have the cases where he's a good husband. He treats his wife well, or that sort of thing. But if he surrounds himself with demented people and he's committed to a demented platform, then his personal character, and Biden's certainly not that, even in his character in himself is horrendous. But even if you did have a great, wholesome guy in and of himself, if he's aiming at bad things and he's surrounding himself with crooks and tyrants, demented tyrants, then his character is irrelevant.
Or even take a milder example of Mike Pence. Mike Pence had a squeaky clean testimony of the Pence rule with regard to women, and I think he would be a great parishioner sitting next to you in a pew. He's a believer, but he folded like a cheap tent when he was governor. Over the
religious freedom.
Religious freedom thing, and being squeaky clean didn't help him to stand where he needed to stood. Trump is the sort of person who would have stood firm, probably for a number of the wrong reasons. But he would have stood for the right thing and not flip.
He stuck with Kavanaugh when a squeaky clean Republican might have bolted because of the reputational.
Exactly.
For the same reason they did with Robert Bork. Republicans would run away from that, and Trump it was baked into the cake as far as he was concerned.
Correct. I was just thinking of Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh is the kind of nominee that an ordinary Republican would have dropped like a hot rock. Rape? Oh no.
Yeah. Don't want to touch that. Are there certain things then you don't think you should bring into the voting booth with you? Like things that false views, or there false views of voting that you guys have encountered among people, when you talk with people about my vote means this and therefore I can't do that? Anything like that?
There's a sacramental thing where you get so pure you would never vote for a Donald Trump. But then on the other end, there's a pragmatist sacramental thing in the other direction. Like, this really is my hope. So my hope is in which box I check.
This is the greatest. This is the most important election of our lifetime.
He's the Messiah.
Everything hinges on that.
Yeah, and it's like this is a question. I know this is about voting. There's two. When it comes to the vote, it is a binary choice. Like, that whole idea is true, and I think there would be a time where you could vote for a third party or whatever. But generally speaking, you want to be practical, and you see, okay, it reduces down to these two. But then there's like the civic duty of being a king that's not simply expressed through my vote, but it's expressed through my what I'm advocating for publicly. Particularly, I'm thinking about leaders that are listening to this. Like, our goal is to move the Overton window while voting for the best candidate. But you can't just sit there and go, well, it's all about my vote, and stop moving the Overton window. So one interesting question that comes to mind, particularly for you, Doug, is, like, given the lay of the land now, what's the civic Overton window that needs to be moved by the Reformed Christians or the Christian nationalists? Like, if you're going, I want to do this so that next round, like in 4 years, to vote for the Republican candidate, he's going to have to be this kind of person, right, or he's going to have to hold to this principle.
Yeah, I think the next the Overton window cannot be moved from inside the window. You've got the Archimedean point has to be outside the window, which means it has to be outside the realm of polite discourse. The biggest next issue on the Overton window is secularism. Right? Are we going to name God? Are we going to use the name of Christ or not? Or are we going to continue, like good conservative Republicans, beseech God to save us without us having to name his name?
Yeah.
That's where we are now. We want God to save America. We want God to bless America without us having to invoke him in anything other than a placeholder way.
Yeah, or we can pray that way in church, but you don't want your candidates to do that on the campaign trail. You don't want guys out there like the way that who's the senator Josh Hawley talks. He's an evangelical Christian and he talks like one.
Right.
And he's very much doing the outside the Overton thing when it comes to
Dusty Devers is another example of that, where the candidate is overtly Christian and unapologetically so, and talks about it. Uh-huh. And I think the voting population, has to get to the point where they're good with remaining a Christian when they go into the voting booth. Okay, I'm going to go into the booth as a Christian, and I'm going to vote for Christian reasons, like I'm a Christian.
And maybe a populace that wouldn't be all put out of whack by the idea of a religious test for office.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Well, if you're going to be under the triune God, then you actually need to swear allegiance to that triune God.
Right.
And if you're unwilling to swear allegiance to that triune God, then you can't be president.
Yeah, and I'll even go so far as to cite Thomas Jefferson, who said religious tests are out for the federal government. They therefore must be left to the states.
Yeah. And I was just actually looking this up. Jefferson, there was a treaty, I can't remember the Indian tribe, but there was a treaty, and in that treaty that Jefferson himself was the one as president that sent it, said, well, seeing that the vast majority of this tribe has been baptized, we're going to fund clergy to minister to them, and the United States government is going to fund the building of the church building in which you will worship. This was Jefferson, and he proposed a seal that Benjamin Franklin actually, they were like right in a line, a United States federal seal, the one that Jefferson proposed that actually didn't get accepted, had an image of the Egyptian army, Pharaoh and his army, being buried in the sea with Moses and Israel with the pillar of fire coming down, Moses hands out, right? And I think it said rebellion against tyrants is obedience to God. Right. This is Thomas Jefferson's
right, yeah.
Let's bring that day back.
Yeah, we can get that. It does. Another one that I think of as a common is going into the voting booth with this idea that this is part of my testimony, right? That voting is sort of an act of Christian witness, and that I need to kind of advertise it in a particular way, and that I have a certain audience in mind. So if I go, and sometimes that can be, I'm going to vote for this candidate who I don't think has good policies, but it's going to help my witness, or I'll vote for the candidate, but I'll do it with a sufficient amount of growling and disdain
you're
and
just
disclaimers.
Voting being cool shamed in some way.
Yeah,
right?
You're being cool shamed as you vote. Yeah.
I think to go back to the very beginning of the discussion, I'm going to connect this back to the Chevron case, because I think that there's actually a principle there that's really fundamental in the shift in America, because the whole growth of the administrative state is the movement from actual decision making from inside of elected officials and appointed officials to unelected, unappointed bureaucrats. But it's justified because it's the shift to expertise. Mm-hmm. And so the two things that are sort of in tension with each other is, do you want somebody who was elected, or do you want somebody who's an expert? And there's something about that expert that really always pulls people. Like, that's the responsible thing, is to push this decision on climate, on whatever.
We love a Fauci. We love a Fauci.
Yeah. Fauci is an expert.
No, that's exactly what it is. I mean, COVID was the great unmasking of all of that. And we're seeing this again and again. We're seeing this again and again, that actually, in a very pragmatic way, an elected accountability is way more effective and pragmatic than expertise. But I think that whole cool shaming is the same thing. Like I think when I read the arguments, I think that this is the candidate I ought to vote for, but everybody tells me that like this is the right thing to do. This is the faithful thing, and we constantly defer to that pressure and that expertise. But I think that's a big part of what's going on.
And what the debate did was it dampened the enthusiasm of all those administrators of the cool shame.
Right.
Yeah.
Because in order to sneer at your cousin who's going to vote for Trump,
Because he's a wrecking ball.
you're going to have to say, so you're voting for the sleepwalking, you're voting for the other guy?
Yeah.
Well, that is going to make you hesitate about going into conversations like that, even if you know what you're going to do.
Right. Well, and I think that also with the cool shame, there's an element of the Christian need sometimes to differentiate from the wrong kind of either Christian or wrong kind of conservative. So you've got one person, you got two voters doing the same action. They're both pulling the lever, say in this case for Trump. One of them is doing so because they think Trump is the Messiah and has never done anything wrong and is going to, do all these and all that kind of thing. So he's all in, ultra MAGA. You got that guy. And then you got the other.
I've seen some commercials.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, where you kind of go, oh, that actually is out there. Then you got the other guy who's just, prudentially weighing the options and going, well, demented, party of death, and demented and dementia, party of death, and sexual insanity, and then reasonable, we want a border and all this other stuff. And so on that, I'm going to go with Trump because that's the options I've been given. And the thing is that there's a certain type of person who looks at that and goes, if I do the second, the prudential, I'm going to be accused of being the first, and I don't want to be accused of being the first. I don't want to be associated with those people. Yeah. And so I've got to figure out a way to differentiate myself from them as a matter of my sort of self-understanding of the kind of Christian that I am. Right.
Exactly.
And so there's this, it's like it's the progressive gaze thing again, where you just kind of have this little progressive on your shoulder going, yeah, but are you with them? And it's like, well, electorally, I guess I am. In terms of motives and everything else, no, but who cares? Like that, why they did it is not as important as.
And that's, I've got a chapter on this in the Mere Christendom. It's the Jesus mobs chapter, where in first century Palestine, there were angry, surly mobs who were threatening to stone the religious leaders.
Yeah.
And they were marked by the fact that they'd received the baptism of John the Baptist. And maybe had not listened to everything John the Baptist had said. They hadn't internalized everything. And then there were the people who had not received the baptism of John the Baptist. So you've got the inner ring of, not inner ring, but the disciples of Christ and the people who were there following him closely, listening to the Sermon on the Mount, or the triumphal entry crowd, the people who really understood what was going on. And then you've got the great populace out there that held Jesus in high esteem. Mm-hmm. They loved Jesus. They didn't understand everything because they're threatened to kill people.
Yeah, right.
Right. But the disciples never apologized for those people once. Right. It's sort of like the vote. You vote the same way. Uh-huh. What do you think of John the Baptist? He's a prophet of God. He's a prophet of God.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have any obligation to answer for everybody in the world who would answer that question the same way.
Yeah, right. Paul does the same thing, right? Whenever he's mistaken for an Egyptian assassin. Aren't you that Egyptian who led the assassins out there? And he just sort of calmly clarifies and then says, back to business. I'm not worried about who you're going to try to tag me with. So I think that guilt by association thing does sort of weigh heavy, though, on evangelical consciences. And so would you say, as you're going into the voting booth, you said 2024, you're voting for Trump again. What's your demeanor? Like, cheerful. You're going in cheerful, even though this is a dumpster fire of epic proportions.
I think we ought to deal with dumpster fires cheerfully.
Cheerfully, okay. God loves a cheerful
dumpster fire. Put her out here.
That's right. You guys cheerful too as you enter the voting booth?
Yeah, and I think you're probably right about this evangelical guilt by association thing. Uh-huh. But I mean, some of the basics would be good to remember. Just like stop caring so much what particularly the left thinks about you. Like, I think that group of evangelicals is shrinking.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing. I think we have far more guys that are kind of a part of the new right or whatever that don't really care. And I think that's far better to be a part of kind of the rough and rowdy people that would be hanging with John the Baptist crew than to be a part of that gospel coalition, gooey, what
nuanced.
But I really think, I mean, maybe those people still exist. I don't know many of them, but I think if those people do exist, you have to say, look, you seek the glory that comes from God, not the glory that comes from man, and that is what you're doing. So if you're worried about feeling dirty because of what you would be thrown in with the J6ers, I'd say, well, stop. You got to stop doing that.
Don't worry.
Yeah, like call you Buffalo Man.
Yeah. Last question. Since it is 4th of July, anything in particular you guys are grateful for as good American citizens here as we celebrate the, our independence?
I am grateful for a long and heroic political tradition that is buried under a lot of rubble currently, but it's there. And so the work of ressourcement, if you're willing to spend time with old books and in libraries, I think there's a lot of good structure still in our bones and still in our structures and our laws. I'm just very grateful for that.
Okay.
I'll go. Yeah, I mean, I love just seeing at this particular moment. On the one hand, you see so many things falling apart, but I see, particularly in a sort of younger generation, there is a kind of rising up on the conservative side, and people who are increasingly unashamed of being male, being heterosexual, being a Christian, wanting to raise a Christian family. There's a ease with which I see a lot of people wearing their faithfulness as Christians that 10 or 20 years ago they were deeply insecure about. But there's kind of a new, I'm comfortable with this, and I kind of don't give a rip. I'm going to go forward and build something impressive.
Right. It's the assume the center thing that we talk a lot about, right? There's more people who are just going, well, I am this, and so I'm just going to do it assertively and self-consciously. Yeah.
I'm very grateful that Richard Dawkins is a cultural Christian.
Okay.
And he laments the demise of the cathedrals in England. And this is a moment. So moving the Overton window, this is a moment where it can be moved. I mean, I think that thing is pretty greased up. And there's all sorts of opportunity for not only ressourcement, going back to the sources and really discovering the American Christian founding. I'd point to Mark David Hall's book, just kind of a lay-level entry into this. You'll be shocked by, religious oaths and vows. I mean, 90+% Protestant nation. Like, it's just very clear who our people are and our heritage. But then fast forwarding to the moment, the rails have been greased, and it's an exciting time to be alive. I mean, you have one of the leading atheists saying he wants to maintain Christmas carols and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So we should just be very grateful and doubling down on seeing the kind of recovery of our Christian heritage.
That's great. Good. Gentlemen, thanks very much. Happy 4th of July, and we will see you all next time.